My father staged a fall and then falsified me of trying to kill him, pulled out an old poem as evidence and essentially imprisoned me. He sneered, "You'll have to beg for forgiveness." But I secretly called for help. A few days later, with his lawyer by his side, his lees collapsed in the face of evidence of his manipulation and the threat of counter-prosecution. His evil plan went up in smoke, but the question remained, would he really stop? Or was this just the beginning of a more brutal plan of revenge? The 3 a.m. shriek of my phone yanked me out of a dead sleep, my heart instantly trying to claw its way out of my chest. It was Maya, my sister, and she wasn't just crying, she was hysterical. "Ethan, Dad's hurt, he fell, and he's saying it's your fault. He's saying you tried to kill him." Tried to kill him? My own father? The 3 a.m. shriek of my phone yanked me out of a dead sleep, my heart instantly trying to claw its way out of my chest. It was Maya, my sister, and she wasn't just crying, she was hysterical. "Ethan, Dad's hurt, he fell, and he's saying it's your fault. He's saying you tried to kill him." Tried to kill him? My own father? The words slammed into me, cold and brutal. Samuel Miller, the man who'd spent my entire life making me feel like dirt, the man whose approval I'd pathetically chased for years only to be met with a sneer or a dismissive wave of his hand, was now accusing me of attempted murder? It was insane. It was impossible. But Maya's terror was real, bleeding through the phone line, a raw, ragged sound that scraped against my nerves. "He says you left the basement door open on Thanksgiving, Ethan. The light off. He says you knew he'd fall. He won't let me call an ambulance until he talks to you. Until you admit it." Thanksgiving, 4 months ago, a lifetime ago, I hadn't been anywhere near that goddamn basement. I'd spent the entire miserable holiday cooped up in the guest room, nursing a lukewarm coffee and avoiding the inevitable family landmines. This was a lie. A sick, twisted lie. Classic Dad. But the accusation itself, the sheer venom of it, made my blood run cold. Admit it? Admit to a crime I hadn't even imagined, let alone committed? The man was a master manipulator, a king of gaslighting. But this was a new level of depravity, even for him. "I'm on the first flight," I bit out, already yanking clothes from my dresser, the familiar rage mixing with a sickening dread. This wasn't just a family drama. This felt like walking into a meticulously laid trap. What kind of sick game was he playing now? And why was Maya, usually the one to see through his BS, sounding so utterly convinced? Stepping into that old house in Kennebunkport hours later was like being smothered by a damp, mildewed blanket of bad memories. The air itself felt thick with old accusations and unspoken hate. Maya was a ghost at the door, her face pale, her eyes huge and terrified, rimmed with red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. And there was Dad, Samuel, sprawled on the living room sofa like a fallen Roman emperor, his face a ghastly shade of gray, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle in a makeshift sling that looked like one of Mom's old dish towels. But the second he saw me, his eyes, usually just cold steel, blazed with a raw, terrifying fury. "So, the prodigal son returns," he rasped, his voice a venomous hiss that cut through the oppressive silence. "Come to finish the job, did you? Came to make sure your old man was finally out of your miserable way?" "Dad, this is insane," I started, my voice hoarse, trying to keep the tremor of disbelief out of it. But he wasn't listening. He never listened. "Insane? Leaving a death trap for your own father, that's insane. You always wanted me gone, didn't you? Always resented me. Couldn't stand that I saw right through your little act, your precious artistic ambitions." He was practically spitting the words, his face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. The man could win an Oscar for this performance. This wasn't just an accusation. It was a declaration of war. He was actually, seriously, accusing me of trying to kill him. Of plotting his demise. And Maya just stood there by the dusty fireplace, wringing her hands, her eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. My own sister. Was she actually buying this garbage? Was she so terrified of him, so brainwashed, that she couldn't see the glaring, obvious insanity of it all? The silence from her was a knife in my back, almost worse than his lunatic ranting. "I wasn't even near the damn basement on Thanksgiving, Dad," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It was like talking to a brick wall that was actively trying to crush me. "You know, I spent the whole day in the guest room trying to avoid your usual charming holiday commentary. And for the record, I don't want you dead. I just want you to leave me the hell alone." His face contorted further, if that was even possible. "Don't you dare try to twist this, you ungrateful whelp. You were skulking around all day, probably waiting for your chance. Your mother, God rest her soul, she'd be ashamed of you. Ashamed of what you've become, plotting against your own flesh and blood. Bringing Mom into this." Of course, his go-to move, using her memory as another weapon in his arsenal of emotional torture. She'd been the buffer, the one who'd occasionally, timidly, tried to stand up for me. Now that she was gone, he had free reign. "Mom would know I'd never do something like this." I shot back, the words tearing out of me. "She'd be horrified by you, by these disgusting lies you're spewing." "R1. Lies?" He coughed, a dry, rattling sound that was probably meant to sound pathetic but just sounded manipulative. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, boy? You thought you could get away with it, but I'm tougher than you think. I survived your little scheme." He was building an entire narrative, a conspiracy, with me as the villain. I looked at Maya again, a desperate plea in my eyes. "Say something. Tell him he's wrong. Tell him I'd never." But she just stared at the floor, her shoulders hunched. The betrayal from her silence was a fresh stab of pain. My own family. They were ready to believe I was a monster, a cold-blooded attacker, based on nothing but his twisted, hateful fantasy. My homecoming wasn't just bitter. It was the first shot fired in a battle I hadn't even known I was in. A battle for my sanity, for my name. "So, what now, Dad?" I asked, my voice heavy with a weariness that went bone deep. You going to call the cops? Press charges? Or is this just another one of your sick little games to make me miserable? He actually smirked, a truly grotesque expression on his pain-contorted face. Oh, the police will be involved. Don't you worry about that. But first, I want to hear you say it. I want to hear you admit what you did. I want to hear you beg for forgiveness. Beg for forgiveness? For something I didn't do? The arrogance, the sheer, unadulterated narcissism of the man was breathtaking. He didn't want justice. He wanted submission. He wanted to break me. He'd been trying to do it my whole life, and now he thought he finally had the ultimate leverage. I have nothing to admit, Dad, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion he was so clearly craving. Because I didn't do anything. You fell. Maybe you were careless. Maybe you were drunk. But it had nothing to do with me. His eyes narrowed to slits. Drunk? Are you accusing me now? Trying to deflect, are you? Typical. Always twisting things. Always shirking responsibility. He gestured vaguely with his good arm. Maya, call Dr. Henderson. Tell him I need him to come over. And then we'll see about the police. But your brother here isn't leaving this house until I get the truth out of him. Dr. Henderson, the old family doctor, a man who'd known Dad for 50 years, a man who probably still thought Dad walked on water. Great. More allies for the prosecution. And isn't leaving this house? Was he actually holding me hostage now? Maya finally looked up, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. Dad, maybe we should just go to the emergency room. Dr. Henderson might not be able to. I said call Dr. Henderson, he roared, and Maya flinched, scurrying to the phone like a startled mouse. I watched her, a fresh wave of anger and disappointment washing over me. She was so cowed, so utterly under his thumb. Years of his emotional abuse had ground her down, just like he'd tried to do with me. The only difference was, I'd managed to escape, or so I'd thought. Now, it seemed, he was determined to drag me back into his toxic orbit, using any means necessary. While Maya was on the phone, her voice a low, trembling murmur, I took a closer look at Dad. He was definitely in pain, his breathing shallow, his skin clammy, but there was something else too. Something in his eyes beyond the anger and the pain. A flicker of cunning? A glint of satisfaction? It was like he was relishing this drama, this opportunity to finally have me exactly where he wanted me. Accused, trapped, and at his mercy. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by Maya's hushed tones and Dad's occasional theatrical groan. I felt like I was in some surreal play, a Kafkaesque nightmare where logic had no place and guilt was predetermined. My mind raced. How could I prove my innocence when the accuser was also the judge and jury, and my only potential witness was too terrified to speak? I thought about just walking out, daring him to stop me. But what if he actually called the police then and there, spun some even more elaborate tale? With his supposed injuries, who would they believe? Him, the injured old man? Or me, the estranged son he was painting as a violent, resentful monster? Dr. Henderson arrived about 40 minutes later. A stooped, elderly man with kind eyes that seemed out of place in this house of venom. He examined Dad with a practiced, gentle touch, asking questions in a soft voice. Dad, of course, played the part of the brave, suffering victim to the hilt, wincing at just the right moments, his voice weak and trembling as he recounted his terrible fall. He conveniently left out the part about it being my fault, at least for now, in front of the doctor. Smart. He knew how to play his audience. Well, Samuel, Dr. Henderson said finally, straightening up. It looks like you've got a nasty sprain, possibly a fracture in your wrist, and those ribs are definitely going to be sore for a while. You really should go to the hospital for x-rays, get that arm properly set. Nonsense, Bill, Dad huffed, waving his good hand dismissively. I'm too old to be fussed over in one of those places. You just patch me up here. I'll be fine. Tougher than I look, you know. Dr. Henderson sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. At the very least, you need to keep that arm immobilized and take it easy. No heroics. And painkillers. I'll write you a prescription. He turned to me then, his gaze surprisingly sharp. Ethan, isn't it? Haven't seen you since you were, well, a lot younger. You'll be staying to help your father out, I presume? Before I could answer, Dad cut in, his voice suddenly stronger. Oh, Ethan will be here, Bill. He'll be here. We have a lot to discuss. Family matters, you understand. The way he said family matters sent a chill down my spine. It was a threat, plain and simple, delivered with a veneer of weary paternal concern. Dr. Henderson looked from Dad to me, then to Maya, who was still hovering anxiously by the door, and I saw a flicker of understanding, or maybe just pity, in his eyes. He knew this family. He knew Dad. He probably knew more than he let on. Well, he said, packing his bag. Call me if there's any change, Samuel, or if you come to your senses and decide to go to the hospital. He gave me one last, unreadable look before letting himself out. The moment the door closed, Dad's demeanor shifted again. The suffering victim vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating tyrant. All right, boy, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. The good doctor's gone. Now, let's talk about what really happened. Let's talk about why you tried to send your old man to an early grave. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but the malice in it was louder than any shout. And don't even think about lying to me. I always know when you're lying. I always know when you're lying. His words hung in the stale air of the living room, a pronouncement from on high, the decree of a petty god who reveled in his own perceived omniscience. My stomach churned. This wasn't a conversation, it was an interrogation, a psychological game he was determined to win, and I was the unwilling, prejudged participant. There's nothing to lie about, Dad, I said, trying to inject a weariness I truly felt into my voice, hoping it might somehow penetrate his armor of self-righteous fury. You fell. It was an accident, a tragic, unfortunate accident, but it wasn't my doing. He scoffed, a dry, rasping sound that was more contempt than amusement. An accident? You think I'm a fool, boy? That basement door is never left open. Never. And the light? Always on if someone's down there. But on Thanksgiving, when my loving, attentive son was gracing us with his oh-so-rare presence, suddenly it's a booby trap? Convenient, wouldn't you say? His eyes, those cold, calculating chips of ice, bored into me. He was building his case, brick by rotten brick, and he didn't care how illogical or insane it sounded. He just needed it to sound plausible enough to himself and to poor, terrified Maya, who was now hovering by the kitchen doorway, looking like she was about to either bolt or throw up. I told you, I said, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. I wasn't near the basement. I was in the guest room. Ask Maya. She brought me coffee up there. Twice. I looked pointedly at my sister, silently begging her to corroborate even this small, insignificant detail. Maya flinched as if I'd struck her. Her eyes darted to Dad, then back to the floor. I don't remember, Ethan, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. It was a busy day. I might have. Might have? The betrayal, subtle as it was, stung like a fresh wound. She knew. Of course she knew. But she was too terrified of him, too conditioned by years of his tyranny, to offer even a sliver of support. He had them both exactly where he wanted them. Dad's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. See? Even your sister doesn't back up your flimsy alibi. You were down there, Ethan. Snooping, plotting, probably looking for something to steal, knowing you. Steal? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. What is there to steal in this mausoleum, Dad? Your collection of dusty regrets? Your lifetime supply of resentment? His face darkened. Don't get smart with me, boy. You've always been jealous. Jealous of what I built, jealous of the family name you clearly despise. You wanted to hurt me, to incapacitate me, maybe even take over. Take over? He was delusional. This house, this family name, was a prison I'd escaped years ago. The only reason I ever came back was for Maya, and occasionally, in moments of misguided hope, for the ghost of the father I wished he could have been. I don't want anything from you, Dad, I said, my voice low and intense, except for you to stop this insanity and get the medical help you clearly need. For your arm and for your head. That was a mistake. His eyes flashed with a dangerous light. He pushed himself up slightly on the sofa, wincing, but his voice when he spoke was pure venom. You think I'm crazy? You're the one who's unhinged, Ethan. Always have been. Moody, secretive, prone to fits of temper. Your mother worried about you constantly, you know. Worried you'd snap one day. He was weaponizing Mom's memory again, twisting her concern into condemnation. It was his favorite tactic, the one that always cut the deepest. I felt the familiar burn of helpless anger. Maya, he barked, not taking his eyes off me. Bring me my phone, and the number for Detective Miller. Detective Miller? Not a detective. Detective Miller. He had a specific cop in mind. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was a plan. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad, no, Maya whispered, her eyes wide with panic. Don't do that. Ethan didn't mean it. He's just upset. Upset? Dad chuckled, a chilling sound. Oh, he's going to be a lot more than upset when he's sitting in a police station trying to explain how his fingerprints ended up all over that basement railing, right where I fell. Fingerprints? I hadn't touched that railing in years. He was fabricating evidence now, or planning to. This was escalating far beyond anything I could have imagined. I had to get out of there. I had to find a way to prove my innocence before he dragged me so deep into his twisted narrative that I'd never escape. I'm not staying here for this, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to sound firm. You're unhinged. I'm going to call a cab. I reached for my phone. You're not going anywhere, Dad snarled. He fumbled with his good hand in his pocket and pulled out my car keys. My rental car keys. How the hell had he gotten those? I'd left them on the hall table when I arrived. He must have had Maya get them. Give me my keys, Dad. Not until you confess, Ethan. Not until you tell me why you did it. He dangled the keys tauntingly, a cruel glint in his eyes. We have all the time in the world. And Detective Miller, he's a very patient man. I was trapped. Physically trapped. My own father was holding me hostage, accusing me of a crime I didn't commit, with my sister too terrified to help. The walls of that familiar, hateful living room seemed to be closing in, a suffocating cage of his making. Desperation clawed at me. I looked at Maya, one last, silent plea. Her face was a mask of misery, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She was lost to me, a prisoner in her own home, just as I was now. Fine, I said, trying a different tack, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You want a confession? What exactly am I confessing to? Did I use a voodoo doll? Did I hire a hitman who specializes in faulty basement stairs? Spell it out for me, Dad. I want to make sure I get my story straight for your Detective Miller. His jaw tightened. Don't mock me, boy. You know what you did. You snuck down there, loosened the railing, turned off the light. You set a trap. And my motive for this elaborate, dastardly plan, I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm I couldn't contain. Was it for the inheritance I've repeatedly told you I don't want? Or was it just for the sheer, unadulterated joy of seeing you slightly inconvenienced? You did it because you hate me, he roared, his voice cracking. Because you've always hated me. Because I represent everything you're too weak, too cowardly to be. There it was. The core of it all. His own insecurities. His own failures. Projected onto me. His convenient scapegoat. This wasn't about a fall. It was about a lifetime of his own bitterness and resentment. Maya, he said, his voice suddenly calm, almost eerily so. Go upstairs, get the old laptop, the one your mother used to use. There's something on there I think Ethan needs to see. Something that might jog his memory about his true feelings for his old man. Maya looked terrified, but she nodded numbly and scurried out of the room. What now? What new piece of evidence was he about to produce from the depths of his twisted mind? He was enjoying this, I realized with a fresh wave of disgust. He was playing with me, like a cat with a half-dead mouse. While Maya was gone, he just stared at me, that grotesque smirk back on his face. You know, your mother. She saw it too, he said softly. She saw the darkness in you, Ethan. She tried to protect me from it. Poor woman. It probably broke her heart, knowing what her son was capable of. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. But I knew that was exactly what he wanted. Any outburst would just be more proof of my instability, my violent nature. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms, focusing on the sting to keep from exploding. Maya returned, carrying an ancient, clunky laptop. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Dad directed her to plug it in, to turn it on. The boot-up process took an eternity, each whir and click of the old hard drive ratcheting up the tension in the room. There's a folder on the desktop, Dad instructed, his eyes never leaving mine, labeled Ethan's writings. Open it. My blood ran cold. Ethan's writings? I hadn't written anything personal on that laptop since I was a teenager, angst-ridden poems and journaling entries I'd long since forgotten, or tried to. What could possibly be in there that he thought was so damning? Maya's hands trembled as she navigated the old operating system. She found the folder, her finger hovering over the mouse. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Pity? Apology? Open it, Maya, Dad commanded, his voice like a whip crack. She clicked. A list of old document files appeared. Most of them were titled with dates or vague, angsty phrases. The one at the bottom, Dad said, a chilling anticipation in his voice. Read the title out loud, Maya, for your brother. Maya swallowed hard. Her voice was a barely audible whisper. It's titled, If He Were Gone. My heart stopped. If he were gone. I vaguely remembered writing something with that title. A stupid, melodramatic piece of teenage venting after one of Dad's particularly brutal tirades. It was just words, meaningless angst. But in his hands, in this context, I knew exactly how he was going to twist it. Open it, Maya, Dad purred, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Let's all hear what our dear Ethan was dreaming about, shall we? Let's hear his heartfelt wishes for his loving father. Maya's fingers trembled over the trackpad, her gaze fixed on the screen as if it held the power of life and death. Dad, maybe this isn't a good idea, she whispered, her voice laced with a desperate plea. It's old stuff, teenage stuff. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, I think it means everything, don't you, Ethan? Dad countered, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. His eyes, however, sharp and predatory, locked on mine. Let's hear what your younger self had to say. Let's see the real you, the one you try so hard to hide behind that apathetic artistic facade. I wanted to snatch the laptop, to smash it against the wall. That folder was a minefield of adolescent angst, a collection of raw, unfiltered emotions. I'd poured onto the page because I had nowhere else to put them. It was private, it was painful. And in his hands, it was about to become a weapon of mass character destruction. Don't, Maya, I said, my voice low and urgent. Please, it's not what he thinks. But Dad just chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Scared, Ethan? Scared for us to see the monster lurking beneath? He gestured impatiently at Maya. Read it, or I'll have Ethan here read it. Perhaps he'd like to perform his own work. Maya flinched. Then, with a defeated sigh, she clicked open the document. The old word processor program loaded with agonizing slowness. The words appeared on the screen, stark and damning in the dim light of the living room. My words. My stupid, angry teenage words. Maya began to read, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, which somehow made it even worse. If he were gone, would the sun shine brighter? Would the birds sing sweeter? Would the air in this house finally be breathable, free of the constant, suffocating weight of his disapproval, his disappointment, his endless, silent judgment? I closed my eyes, a wave of humiliation and helpless anger washing over me. It was just a stupid poem, a childish fantasy written by a hurt, confused kid. But hearing it now, in this charged atmosphere, with Dad's triumphant gaze boring into me, it sounded like a confession, like a motive. Maya continued, her voice faltering slightly. If he were gone, would I finally be free? Free to be myself, without his shadow looming over every choice, every dream? Would the silence be a comfort instead of a weapon he wields so expertly? Sometimes, I dream of that silence. A world without his voice, without his footsteps, without his oppressive presence. A world where I could finally breathe. When she finished, the silence in the room was absolute, heavier than ever. Dad was beaming, a grotesque parody of a proud father whose child had just recited a prize-winning essay. Well, he said, his voice soft but laced with triumph. Doesn't sound like meaningless angst to me, Ethan. Sounds like a pretty clear desire, a wish, maybe even a plan. That was years ago, Dad. I exploded, unable to contain myself any longer. I was a kid. I was angry. You were impossible to live with. It was just words. It didn't mean I actually wanted you dead. Didn't it? He countered smoothly. Or did you just lack the courage back then? Maybe now, with me getting older, a little more frail, you saw your opportunity. A little push, a little accident in the dark, who would question it? Especially with a history of such dark thoughts. He gestured to the laptop. This, my boy, is what they call premeditation. He was twisting it, a master manipulator at work, turning teenage angst into a cold-blooded plot. And Maya Maya was just sitting there staring at the screen, her face pale. Did she believe him? Did she really think I was capable of that? This is insane, I said, shaking my head, trying to clear the fog of disbelief. You're taking a stupid poem I wrote when I was 15 and trying to frame me for attempted murder. No one will believe this. This is circumstantial nonsense. Oh, I think Detective Miller will find it very interesting, Dad said, his smile widening. A disgruntled son, a history of resentment, a convenient accident. It all paints a very compelling picture, wouldn't you say? Especially when coupled with your less than stellar behavior today. Your anger, your defensiveness. He had me. He had me backed into a corner, using my own past, my own emotions, against me. I felt a surge of panic, cold and sharp. I needed to get out. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, who wasn't a part of this toxic, insane family. I need to use the bathroom, I said abruptly, standing up. It was the only excuse I could think of. Dad's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. Don't try anything foolish, Ethan. The doors are locked. And Maya will be right here. He meant it as a threat to me, but it sounded more like a warning to her. I walked out of the living room, my legs feeling like lead. The short hallway to the bathroom felt like a mile. I could feel their eyes on my back. Once inside, I locked the door, my hands trembling. I leaned against the cool tiles, trying to breathe, trying to think. My phone. I still had my phone. Dad hadn't thought to take it. Not yet. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling with the screen. Who could I call? Not the police. Not yet. Dad would just spin his story, and without concrete proof of his manipulation, it would be my word against his. And he had the injuries to back up his tale. My friends? They were hours away, in another city. They wouldn't understand the sheer depth of his madness. Then I remembered. Mrs. Peterson, our old neighbor. She'd known our family for years. She'd seen Dad at his best and, more often, at his worst. She'd always been kind to me and Maya, a quiet, observant presence on the periphery of our chaotic lives. Maybe, just maybe, she would listen. Maybe she would believe me. My fingers flew across the screen, typing a desperate, rambling text. Mrs. Peterson, it's Ethan Miller. I'm at my dad's house. He's accusing me of something terrible. He's not letting me leave. I don't know what to do. Please, can you help me? I'm scared. I hit send, my heart pounding. Would she even see it? Did she still have the same number? It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. I flushed the toilet for effect, splashed some water on my face, trying to look like I'd actually used the bathroom. When I came out, Dad was still on the sofa, Maya still hunched over the laptop, though the screen had gone dark. Feeling better? Dad asked, his voice laced with that infuriating, knowing sarcasm. Peachy, I muttered, sitting back down on the edge of the armchair, my mind racing. How long would it take for Mrs. Peterson to see my text if she saw it at all? What if she didn't respond? What was Dad's next move? We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had been the backdrop to so many miserable moments in this house. Each tick felt like a countdown to something. Then Dad spoke, his voice deceptively calm. You know, Ethan, there's an easy way out of this, for both of us. I looked at him wary. What's that? Just admit it, he said softly. Admit you made a mistake, that you were angry, that you weren't thinking clearly. Tell me you're sorry. Tell me you'll try to be a better son. We can put this all behind us. No police, no fuss, just our little family secret. My stomach churned. He wanted a confession, not for justice, but for control. He wanted me to break, to submit, to validate his twisted narrative of me as the villain, him as the wronged victim. If I confessed, he would own me, forever. He would have this a BC, let's use English. This leverage. Over me, a weapon he could wield whenever he chose. I told you, Dad, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I have nothing to confess, because I didn't do anything. His face hardened. The mask of calm benevolence slipped, revealing the cold fury beneath. Stubborn, aren't you? Just like your mother. Always had to do things the hard way. He sighed, a theatrical sound of put upon patience. Well, I tried. I offered you an olive branch. You chose to spit on it. He reached for the phone beside him. Maya, get me Detective Miller's number again. I think it's time we escalated this. My heart leaped into my throat. He was actually going to do it. He was going to call the cops, feed them his pack of lies, use that stupid teenage poem as proof. I was running out of time. Just as Maya reached for the phone book, there was a knock at the front door. Not a timid knock, but a firm, authoritative one. Dad frowned. Were you expecting someone, Maya? Maya shook her head, her eyes wide. The knock came again, louder this time. Well, answer it then, Dad snapped, clearly annoyed by the interruption to his grand drama. Maya scurried to the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. She pulled it open, and my breath caught in my chest. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Peterson, and beside her, looking very stern and very official, was a uniformed police officer. Good afternoon, Samuel, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice surprisingly strong, her gaze fixed on my father. Officer, this is Samuel Miller. And this is his son, Ethan, who seems to be in a bit of a predicament. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and in them, I saw not pity, but a fierce, unexpected determination. Hope, fragile but real, flickered to life within me. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone in this madhouse after all. The sight of Mrs. Peterson, our elderly, usually quiet neighbor, standing on our doorstep with a police officer, was like a bomb going off in the already supercharged atmosphere of our living room. Dad's face, which had been alight with a sort of righteous, manipulative glee, instantly contorted into a mask of surprised indignation. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Martha? What in God's name is the meaning of this? Dad blustered, trying to regain control. His voice attempting its usual booming authority but cracking slightly around the edges. And why have you brought the police to my home? The officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose name tag read Officer Davies, stepped forward slightly, his presence alone enough to alter the room's suffocating power dynamic. His gaze was neutral but observant, sweeping from Dad on the sofa to me, then to a trembling Maya. Mr. Miller, Officer Davies said, his voice calm and professional. We received a call from Mrs. Peterson expressing concern for your son, Ethan. She indicated he might be here against his will and was potentially being accused of something he didn't do. Dad's face turned a mottled shade of purple. Against his will? That's preposterous. Ethan is here because he attacked me. He tried to kill me. This woman, he gestured contemptuously towards Mrs. Peterson, is a meddling old busybody who doesn't know what she's talking about. Mrs. Peterson didn't flinch, her chin lifted a notch. I've known this family for 30 years, Samuel, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. I know you, and I know Ethan, and I know that boy wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone his own father. What I do know is that Ethan sent me a text message in distress, saying you were accusing him of terrible things and not letting him leave. That sounded like a call for help to me, officer. My heart swelled with a desperate gratitude. She'd believed me. She'd actually acted. Officer Davies looked at me. Mr. Miller, Ethan, is this true? Are you being held here? Do you feel unsafe? This was it. My chance. But Dad's eyes were burning into me. A silent, furious warning. Maya was practically vibrating with fear beside the kitchen door, her face white as a sheet. The years of his intimidation, his psychological warfare, they were a heavy weight. I took a deep breath. Yes, officer, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. My father is accusing me of causing his fall down the basement stairs. He claims I did it deliberately. He took my rental car keys and said I couldn't leave until I confessed. He was about to call a detective to have me arrested. He's lying, Dad roared, trying to push himself up from the sofa, his face contorted in a snarl. He's a born liar, always has been. He's twisting everything. Mr. Miller, please remain calm, Officer Davies said, his voice taking on a firmer edge. He turned back to me. Do you have any reason to believe your father's fall was not an accident you caused? I wasn't even near the basement on Thanksgiving when he claims this supposed trap was set, I stated. I was in the guest room. And I haven't been back to this house until today, when my sister called saying he was hurt and blaming me. I looked at Maya. Maya, tell him. Tell him where I was on Thanksgiving. All eyes turned to Maya. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, trapped between Dad's furious glare and the expectant gazes of the officer and Mrs. Peterson. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, tears welling in her eyes. I can't remember for sure, she stammered, her voice a pathetic little squeak. It was chaotic. My heart sank. Even now, even with help right here, she couldn't, or wouldn't, stand up to him. Dad let out a short, triumphant grunt. See, he has no alibi. He's making it all up. Actually, officer, I said, pulling out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady now. I might have something that could shed some light on my father's state of mind and his methods. I found the audio file from the park, the one where Ela, God, it felt like a lifetime ago now that I was dealing with this particular brand of family insanity, had confessed to her own manipulations. No, wait, that was the wrong family drama, the wrong sister. My brain was scrambling. I didn't have a recording of Dad, yet. My mind raced. What proof did I have beyond my word? The poem. He was going to use the poem. He's going to show you a poem I wrote when I was 15, I said quickly to Officer Davies, trying to preempt Dad's next move. A stupid, angsty poem about wishing he was gone. He's trying to use it as proof of premeditation. He had my sister read it out loud to me just before you arrived. Dad's eyes widened, then narrowed. He hadn't expected me to bring that up myself. It shows his state of mind. His hatred for me, he insisted. It shows I was an unhappy teenager with an overbearing father, I retorted. Officer, my father is a master manipulator. He's trying to frame me. Officer Davies looked from me to Dad, then to Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson, you said you've known this family a long time. Can you offer any insight into these dynamics? Before Mrs. Peterson could speak, Dad interjected. She's biased. She always favored him. She doesn't know anything. I know, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice cutting through Dad's bluster. That Samuel Miller has a history of being controlling and emotionally abusive, particularly towards Ethan. I've seen it with my own eyes for years. I've heard the shouting. I've seen Ethan come over to my house looking like a lost soul after one of Samuel's tirades. And I know that when Eleanor, his wife, was alive, she often confided in me about how difficult Samuel could be, how he twisted things, how he needed to always be in control, always be the victim if things didn't go his way. Dad was speechless for a moment, his face turning an even darker shade of red. He looked genuinely shocked that Mrs. Peterson would dare to speak against him so openly, especially in front of a police officer. That's slander, he finally sputtered. You have no proof of any of that. Don't I, Samuel? Mrs. Peterson said quietly. Remember when Ethan was 12 and he won that art competition at school? You were furious he hadn't entered the science fair instead. You belittled his talent for weeks. Eleanor told me you even threw out some of his drawings. A memory, sharp and painful, lanced through me. I'd forgotten about that. The sting of it, even now, was real. Or the time, Mrs. Peterson continued, her voice gaining strength. When Ethan got that scholarship offer to the Art Institute out of state, you told him he was being selfish, that he should stay home and go to the community college, that his art was a waste of time and money. Eleanor was heartbroken for him. Dad was sputtering now, unable to form coherent sentences. He looked from Mrs. Peterson to Officer Davies, then to me, his eyes wild. He was losing control of the narrative, and it was clearly terrifying him. "This is a family matter," he finally managed to yell. "It has nothing to do with her or with you." He jabbed a finger at Officer Davies. "This is about my son trying to kill me." Officer Davies held up a hand. "Mr. Miller, I understand you're upset and injured, but I also have a credible witness here, Mrs. Peterson, and your son, who claims he's being falsely accused and held against his will. Now, Ethan, you said your father took your rental car keys?" "Yes," I confirmed. "They're in his pocket." Officer Davies looked at Dad. "Mr. Miller, could I see those keys, please?" Dad's jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to refuse, to defy the officer. But then, with a sigh of exaggerated martyrdom, he fumbled in his pocket and produced the keys, practically throwing them onto the coffee table. "There," he said sullenly. "Happy now? Can you all just leave me in peace to recover from my son's vicious attack?" "Officer," I said. "He also has my phone. He took it from my sister after she brought him the laptop with my old writings. He said he was going to go through it. My real phone, not the burner I'd used to text Mrs. Peterson. He'd find nothing incriminating, but it was the principle, the invasion. Wait, no, that was the other story's detail. My mind was a mess. He hadn't taken my phone. He had my car keys. The poem was on the laptop. I needed to keep my facts straight." "Officer Davies," I corrected myself, my head spinning slightly from the stress. "He has my car keys. He was using an old laptop of my mother's to try and find old writings of mine to use against me. Maya, where is that laptop now?" Maya, who had been frozen, pointed a trembling finger towards the corner where the old laptop sat on a side table, its screen still dark. Officer Davies nodded. "Ethan, are you free to leave this house if you wish to?" "With my keys, yes," I said. "And you wish to leave?" Desperately, I said, the word heartfelt. "Then I suggest you take your keys and go," Officer Davies said. He then turned to my father. "Mr. Miller, if you wish to file a formal complaint against your son, you can do so down at the station once you've received proper medical attention. Given your injuries, I would strongly advise you to go to the hospital for a full checkup. Refusing medical care after a fall like this can have serious consequences." His tone was professional, but there was an underlying warning. Dad looked like he was about to explode. His entire plan, his grand performance, was unraveling before his eyes. He'd been outmaneuvered, his authority challenged in his own home. "This isn't over, Ethan," he hissed, his eyes promising retribution. "You'll pay for this. You'll all pay for this." He glared at Mrs. Peterson, then at Officer Davies. "Are you threatening an officer, Mr. Miller?" Davies asked, his voice suddenly much colder. Dad blanched. "No, of course not. I'm just upset. I'm in pain. My own son." His voice trailed off, a pathetic attempt to regain sympathy. I picked up my keys from the coffee table. The simple act felt like a monumental victory. "Maya," I said, looking at my sister, "are you okay? Do you want to come with me?" She looked at Dad, then at me, her face a battlefield of fear and indecision. I saw the flicker of longing in her eyes, the desperate wish to escape. But then, Dad coughed, a small, deliberate sound, and her shoulders slumped. I should stay here," she whispered, not meeting my gaze. "Dad needs me." My heart ached for her, but I couldn't force her. She was still trapped, and for now I couldn't save her, but I had saved myself. "Mrs. Peterson?" I said, turning to our neighbor, my voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done." She smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her kind eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. It was the right thing to do. Now, let's get you out of here." Officer Davies escorted us to the door. "Ethan," he said, as I stepped out onto the porch, into the fresh, clean air that suddenly felt like the sweetest thing I'd ever breathed. "If your father does try to file a formal complaint, or if he harasses you in any way, you call us. Understand?" I nodded, a profound sense of relief washing over me, so potent it almost made my knees buckle. "I understand, officer. Thank you." As Mrs. Peterson and I walked away from that house of lies, I didn't look back. I could feel Dad's furious gaze burning into my spine, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid. I was free. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He wouldn't let it be. The drive to Mrs. Peterson's house, just a few blocks away but feeling like a different universe, was mostly silent. I was still reeling, adrenaline thrumming through my veins, mixed with an exhaustion so profound it felt like I hadn't slept in weeks. Mrs. Peterson, bless her soul, didn't press me for details, just let the quiet be a balm. "You can stay here as long as you need, Ethan," she said as she unlocked her front door, her small, neat house, a haven of calm compared to the suffocating toxicity I'd just escaped. "I'll make us some tea." For the next few days, I existed in a strange limbo. I called my boss, vaguely explaining a family emergency, and arranging to work remotely. I mostly stayed inside Mrs. P. Peterson's guest room, trying to process the sheer audacity of what Dad had attempted. He hadn't just accused me, he'd tried to systematically destroy me, to imprison me with his lies. The teenage poem, the feigned injuries, the manipulation of Maya. It was a calculated campaign. My phone remained ominously silent from my family, no calls from Dad, which was both a relief and a source of low-grade anxiety. What was he plotting now? And Maya, I worried about Maya. Was he taking his rage out on her? I sent her a couple of texts. "Are you okay? Let me know if you need anything." But they went unanswered. Read but unanswered. That was worse than no reply at all. It meant she'd seen them, but was either too scared or too unwilling to respond. About a week after my escape, Mrs. Peterson got a call. It was Maya, her voice small and scared. "Dad," she said, had actually gone to the police station. He'd filed a formal complaint against me for assault and reckless endangerment. He'd even gotten Dr. Henderson to write a statement detailing his injuries, conveniently omitting the doctor's recommendation for hospital x-rays. He was painting himself as the frail, elderly victim of his violent, unstable son. "He's telling everyone in town, Martha," Maya whispered, clearly terrified Dad would overhear. "He's saying," Ethan snapped, "that he's dangerous. He's even talking about getting a restraining order against him." My blood ran cold. A restraining order? That would be the ultimate humiliation, the ultimate victory for him. He wasn't just trying to punish me. He was trying to erase me from their lives on his terms, painting me as the aggressor. "Thank you for telling me, Maya," Mrs. Peterson said gently. "You did the right thing." After she hung up, she looked at me, her face grim. "Samuel's not giving up, Ethan. He's escalating. Laugh." "I know," I said, a knot of anger and dread tightening in my stomach. "So what do we do? Do I need a lawyer?" "I think," Mrs. Peterson said, a new steely glint in her eye, "it's time Samuel Miller understood that actions have consequences, and not just for you." The next day, Mrs. Peterson made some calls. She spoke to Officer Davies. She spoke to a lawyer friend of hers, a woman named Miss Chen, who specialized in elder abuse cases, an ironic twist. But Mrs. Peterson explained that Samuel's manipulation and false accusations could, in a way, be seen as a form of emotional abuse directed at me, and his attempts to control Maya certainly fit a pattern. But more importantly, Miss Chen was also a bulldog when it came to exposing fraud and false reporting. Miss Chen agreed to meet with me. She listened to my story, reviewed the text I'd sent Mrs. Peterson, and Mrs. Peterson's own detailed account of Dad's historical behavior. She was particularly interested in the fact that Dad had refused hospital x-rays, which could have definitively proven or disproven the severity of his claimed injuries from that specific fall. "Your father is playing a dangerous game, Ethan," Miss Chen said. "Filing a false police report is a serious offense, and if he's exaggerating his injuries to support that false report, that's even worse. We need to make him understand that he could be the one facing legal trouble." Hell. Her plan was audacious. She wanted to call Dad's bluff. She drafted a letter to him, and to Detective Miller, the one Dad was so keen to involve, outlining the inconsistencies in his story. My alibi for Thanksgiving, which Miss Chen felt was strong enough, even without Maya's corroboration, given the 4-month gap, and Mrs. Peterson's testimony as a long-term witness to his character. The letter strongly suggested that if he pursued his false complaint, we would be forced to file a counter-complaint for harassment, defamation, and potentially for filing a false police report, complete with a request for a full medical evaluation of his claimed injuries by an independent physician. It was a gamble. It could make him dig in his heels even further. But Miss Chen believed that faced with actual legal repercussions for himself, Dad's narcissistic self-preservation would kick in. The letter was sent. We waited. The silence from Dad's end was deafening. For 3 agonizing days, I jumped every time the phone rang. Maya still wasn't responding to my texts. Then, on the 4th day, Detective Miller called me. Not Dad. Me. "Mr. Ethan Miller?" His voice was gruff but professional. "This is Detective Miller. I've received a complaint filed by your father, Samuel Miller. I've also received a rather comprehensive letter from your legal counsel, Miss Chen, and a statement from a Mrs. Martha Peterson." A pause. "Frankly, son, this whole situation stinks to high heaven." I held my breath. "Your father's story has more holes in it than a block of Swiss cheese," the detective continued. "The timeline for your supposed trap setting 4 months ago is ludicrous. His refusal for immediate standard medical verification of his injuries is highly suspicious. And Mrs. Peterson's account of his character, well, let's just say it paints a picture." That relief. So potent it was dizzying. Washed over me. So you don't believe him?" "Let's just say I have serious doubts about the validity of his complaint, Mr. Miller. And I've advised him that pursuing it further, given the information provided by your counsel, could have unforeseen consequences for him." Another pause. "He was less than pleased, but I don't anticipate we'll be taking any further action on his complaint against you at this time. In fact, I've suggested he might want to have a chat with his own lawyer about the potential ramifications of what Miss Chen outlined." He'd folded. Faced with the threat of an investigation into his own actions, Dad had backed down. The bully had blinked. "Thank you, Detective," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. Just doing my job, son. You take care of yourself. And maybe consider putting some serious distance between yourself and that household." Distance. That was an understatement. After I hung up, I just sat there for a long moment, letting it all sink in. It wasn't a full victory. Not yet. The emotional damage was done. My relationship with my father was irrevocably shattered. Not that there was much to shatter in the first place. And Maya. That evening, Maya called Mrs. Peterson. She was crying. Dad, she said, had been in a foul mood ever since the detective called. He'd been ranting and raving, blaming everyone but himself. But he hadn't mentioned me, or his complaint once. He'd dropped it. "He knows he lost, Ethan," Mrs. Peterson told me after she got off the phone with Maya. "He won't admit it, but he knows." A few days later, I made the difficult decision to go back to the house one last time. I needed to get my remaining belongings, the few things I actually cared about, and I needed to see Maya. Mrs. Peterson insisted on coming with me. Miss Chen had advised it, just in case. Dad wasn't home when we arrived. Maya let us in, her eyes still shadowed, but there was a new lightness to her, a tentative hope. "He's been quieter," she said. "Still angry, but not like before." While I packed a couple of boxes, mostly old books and some sentimental items from Mom, Mrs. Peterson sat with Maya in the kitchen. I could hear their low voices, Maya finally, haltingly, telling her side of the story, the fear and the pressure she'd been under. Before I left, I hugged Maya. "You know you don't have to stay here if you don't feel safe, right?" I told her. "You can come live with me. Or with Aunt Carol. You have options." Our mother had another sister. One dad had also alienated years ago. Maya looked down. "I know, I need to think. He's still my dad." I understood. It wasn't that simple for her, but I'd planted the seed. As Mrs. Peterson and I drove away, I looked back at that house, that monument to dysfunction and misery. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a vast, empty indifference. He had no power over me anymore. The next few months were about rebuilding. I found a new apartment in my city. I threw myself into my photography, finding a new clarity, a new focus in my work. I started therapy to unpack the years of emotional abuse. Maya and I started talking more regularly, first through texts, then calls. She was still living with Dad, but things were different. He was subdued, wary, the dynamic had shifted. She told me she was saving money, looking at community college programs in other towns. She was making her own escape plan. I never heard from Dad directly again. No apologies, no acknowledgements, nothing, and that was fine. His silence was the greatest gift he could have given me. About a year later, Maya moved out. She got into a program a few hours away and found a small apartment with a roommate. The first person she called to share the news with was me. She sounded happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in years. The family, as I knew, it was fractured, broken. But from those broken pieces, Maya and I were forging something new. A different kind of bond, one built not on fear or obligation, but on shared survival and a tentative, hopeful future. The House of Lies still stood, but its shadows no longer reached me. I was free. And in that freedom, I was finally finding my own truth, my own peace. The past would always be a part of me, a scar, but it no longer defined me. I was the author of my own story now, and it was going to be a damn good one.